In the busy city of Macondo, people spoke in low whispers about Chief Kato, a billionaire whose riches had no clear source. Some said he was a ritualist, a man who fed his wealth with dark secrets. Everyone warned Amara, a simple village girl, to stay far from him. But Amara was tired of poverty, tired of watching her family struggle. When Kato came with gifts of gold, clothes, and promises of a better life, her heart gave in. She told herself that love would come later, that safety was enough for now. Against every warning, she said yes to his proposal. The wedding was grand, with food and music filling the air, but not everyone was celebrating. The elders sat stiff, their eyes heavy with worry. They noticed something strange as the vows were spoken. Kato's voice did not sound like a man making promises. It sounded like someone chanting. His words blended into a rhythm that made the candles flicker and the wind grow sharp. Still, Amara smiled, blinded by the beauty around her. When the night came, the air grew cold. Strange drums began to beat in the distance, though no musicians were seen. Whispers rushed through the crowd as people exchanged uneasy glances. A few elders shook their heads, saying the signs were too clear, but it was too late. Amara had already tied her life to a man whose wealth came with a price. That night, Macondo held its breath, waiting for the darkness to reveal itself. After the grand wedding, Amara stepped into Chief Kato's mansion for the first time as his bride. The house was huge, glowing with expensive lights, and decorated with treasures she had never seen before. Yet the longer she walked inside, the less it felt like a home. The walls were lined with strange carvings that looked like eyes watching her. Heavy doors stood locked along the hallways, and when she asked what was behind them, Kato only smiled and told her not to worry. She tried to ignore the uneasiness in her heart. She told herself that this was the price of wealth, that she could learn to live with mystery if it meant comfort. As the night grew deeper, the joy of the wedding began to fade. The house, once bright, became dark and heavy with silence. At midnight, Amara woke to the sound of drums. They were not the happy drums of a party, but slow and heavy, as if calling from the ground itself. Her body froze as the sound echoed through the mansion, shaking the walls. She followed the noise until she reached a staircase leading down to a chamber she had never noticed before. There, waiting for her, was Kato. But he was not dressed as a husband. He wore long ceremonial robes, covered in symbols that looked just like the carvings on the walls. His face was stern, and his eyes glowed with a strange light. In his hands, he held a staff, and his voice rose in chants she could not understand. When he turned toward her, he did not call her my wife or Amara. Instead, he called her by name as if she were not a partner, but an object. His words carried weight, like commands to something unseen. Fear gripped her heart as the realization sank in. This was no wedding night. This was a ritual. Kato's wealth, his power, his entire life of comfort had been built on sacrifices, and now it was her turn. She was not brought here to share his life. She was brought here to end hers. The mansion was not her home, but her prison, and the locked doors were not to protect her curiosity, but to keep her from finding the truth too soon. Amara wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy. She watched as the drums grew louder, though no drummers were in sight. The sound came from deep within the walls, as if the house itself was alive. Kato raised his staff higher, his voice booming. Shadows danced along the carvings on the wall, moving like spirits waiting to be called. Her heart pounded. She thought of her family back in the village, of the poor but simple life she had left behind. She remembered the warnings of the elders, the whispers in the market, the uneasy glances at the wedding. She had ignored them all, and now she was standing at the center of a nightmare. Cato's eyes locked on hers, and his voice dropped low. "Tonight, the price must be paid." His words were final. He was not asking, he was declaring. Amara realized too late that in this marriage, she was never the bride. She was the offering. The next morning, Macondo was buzzing with gossip. People expected to see Amara, the new bride, glowing with pride after her grand wedding to Chief Cato. But dawn passed, and then noon came, and she did not appear. The mansion gates stayed closed, and the windows stayed shut. Whispers began to move through the market like wind through dry leaves. "Where is the bride?" some asked. "Why has she not come out to greet us?" Others shook their heads, saying it was not their place to question a man as powerful as Cato. But just as the sun reached its highest point, something strange happened in the town square. A goat wandered in from nowhere, but it was not an ordinary goat. Around its neck shone golden bangles, the very same bangles Amara had worn at her wedding. The villagers froze in shock. The animal looked restless, its eyes too bright, its steps too heavy, as if carrying a burden no beast should carry. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men stepped back in fear. It was the old women who spoke first. Their voices cracked like dry wood, but their words cut through the silence. "The ritual has begun," one of them said. Another added, "She gave herself to him knowingly. She chose wealth over life." The villagers gasped. The meaning was clear. Amara had not disappeared by chance. She had been taken, transformed, or consumed by the very marriage they all celebrated. Her family, who only a day before had been filled with pride, now stood pale and trembling. They remembered how they had praised Cato's gifts, how they had pushed Amara to accept his proposal despite the warnings. They had been blinded by riches, and now the price had come. Neighbors looked at them not with envy anymore, but with pity and quiet blame. The shame was heavier than gold. Children cried as rumors spread like fire. Some said Amara had turned into the goat. Others whispered she had been offered to the spirits in exchange for Cato's power. No one knew the full truth, but everyone felt the same fear. If Cato could take one bride like this, what would stop him from taking another? The market, once lively, fell into a tense hush. Every sound of the goat's hooves on the stones echoed like a warning. As evening came, the goat disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving only dust and silence behind. But the golden bangles remained in people's memory. They had seen them with their own eyes. They could not deny what it meant. Amara was gone. That night, Macondo did not sleep easily. In every household, families whispered in fear. Mothers clutched their daughters, warning them never to be blinded by riches. Fathers avoided looking toward Cato's mansion, as if afraid it could swallow them too. And Amara's own family sat in the dark, broken and ashamed, knowing they had traded their daughter's life for a false promise of security. The curse of ignorance had fallen on them all, and the whole village felt its weight. Amara opened her eyes slowly, expecting death, but instead she found herself lying on a cold stone floor. The chamber was dark, lit only by a faint blue glow coming from the walls. The air was heavy, and she could hear soft whispers all around her, though she saw no one. Her heart pounded as the voices grew clearer. They were not men's voices, but women's, sad, tired, and filled with pain. One voice said, "You are not the first." Another joined, "But you can be the last." Amara sat up quickly, trembling, her body shaking with fear. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. The whispers continued, wrapping around her like smoke, filling her ears with secrets. As her eyes adjusted, she began to see faint figures moving in the shadows. Women dressed in torn wedding gowns, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. drifting like spirits trapped between worlds. Their voices blended together in sorrow. They told her the truth that no villager dared to believe. Chief Cato had married many women before her. Each bride had vanished by dawn, her body gone, but her soul chained to the chamber forever. With each sacrifice, Cato grew richer and more powerful. Every "I do" was not a promise of love, but a contract of death. Amara's blood ran cold as she looked around. The chamber was filled with the presence of countless brides, all staring at her with eyes that begged for freedom. One spirit came closer, her voice softer than the rest. "We were blind, like you. We thought we had found love, safety, and wealth. But we became his offering. Now we wander here forever, bound to his greed." Amara's chest tightened, and a scream escaped her lips, echoing through the chamber. The sound of her own voice bouncing back at her made her feel trapped, like the walls themselves were closing in. But then the whispers shifted. "You are different," the spirit said. "You were not chosen to die like us. You were chosen for something else." Amara's breath caught in her throat. She felt both fear and hope fighting inside her. Why her? Why had she survived the ritual that claimed so many others? The spirits explained that her defiance, her unwillingness to beg or surrender, had disrupted the ritual. Her heart, though afraid, had resisted. This resistance made her dangerous to Cato and powerful to them. She shivered as their words sank in, the weight of their hope pressed down on her shoulders. She was only one woman, a poor girl who had dreamed of wealth, yet now the fate of countless souls rested on her. The spirits warned her that Cato would try again. He would come for her, not as a husband, but as a master desperate to finish what he had started. If she failed, her soul would join theirs. But if she stood strong, she could break the cycle forever. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. She thought of the village above, the family who had traded her for wealth, and the women who had been lost before her. Her fear was real, but the whispers gave her strength. She was no longer just a bride. She was a key, a weapon hidden inside a sacrifice. As the spirits faded into the walls, their last words burned into her mind. "You carry us now. Do not fail." And in that cold chamber, Amara clenched her fists. Knowing she had been chosen for a fight she could not run from, Amara sat in the dark chamber, her body weak, but her spirit burning with the voices of the women who had spoken to her. The heavy door creaked, and Chief Cato stepped inside. Gone was the polished suit, the proud smile of a wealthy husband. He was dressed in black robes, his chest covered in strange markings that glowed faintly in the dark. His face looked sharper, older, almost inhuman, and when he smiled, it was not with love, but with hunger. His eyes glowed like burning coals as he stared at her. "You know the truth now," he said, his voice deep and heavy, filling the chamber. "My wealth is not from the markets, not from the oil, not from the land. It is from sacrifice. From the vows spoken at the altar." He paced slowly around her, his robes sweeping the floor. "Every bride, every woman who said 'I do' to me, gave me her soul. That is the price. That is the secret of my power." Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She wanted to scream, but her throat was dry. Cato leaned closer, so close she could feel his breath against her ear. "Now, Amara," he whispered, "your time has come. The price is due." Her body trembled, but her spirit refused to break. She remembered the voices of the trapped women, their warning, their hope. She looked at him with tearful eyes, but found courage in the pain of those who came before her. Slowly, with a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Then take me." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Cato froze, his eyes narrowing. Something was wrong. The drums in the distance faltered. The shadows on the walls began to twist. Amara closed her eyes, expecting death. But instead she heard the spirits rising. Their voices swirled through the room, louder and stronger than before. The walls shook, as if the mansion itself was angry. Cato's glowing eyes widened in shock. He raised his hands, trying to steady the ritual, but the power slipped from him. "No!" he hissed. "This is not how it is meant to be." The shadows that once obeyed him now turned against him, wrapping tightly around his arms and legs. His staff cracked in his hands. The markings on his body burned like fire, and his voice broke into screams. The spirits spoke as one, their voices thundering. "A willing heart is not the price. Your soul is the price." Amara watched in awe as Cato fell to his knees, his power crumbling. The wealth he had built from blood and lies began to fade. Gold turned to dust, jewels cracked, and the mansion groaned as if ready to collapse. The more he fought, the tighter the shadows held him. His screams filled the chamber, echoing through every corner of the mansion. Amara's tears flowed, not from fear anymore, but from relief. She had not been taken. She had given herself willingly, and that choice had broken the chain. The curse was not hers to carry. It belonged to Cato. His glowing eyes dimmed, his body sinking into the darkness he had once controlled. The last thing she heard before silence fell was his voice, broken and weak, whispering, "This cannot be." Then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows, leaving only emptiness behind. Amara stood trembling, knowing the ritual had failed, not because she had resisted, but because she had surrendered. And in doing so, she had turned the spirits against him. The drums beat like thunder, shaking the ground under Amara's feet. Chief Cato stood tall in the chamber, chanting words that made the air grow heavy and cold. His voice rose and fell, commanding the shadows to obey. Amara felt the pull of his power, the way it tried to reach for her soul. Her body trembled, but she did not move. She did not cry. She did not beg. She stood still, her eyes locked on his glowing face. And in that moment, everything changed. Instead of draining her life, the shadows began to twist and turn. Slowly, they slipped away from Amara and curled back toward Cato. His eyes widened in confusion. He raised his staff higher, chanting faster, louder, desperate to regain control. But the more he called, the stronger the shadows wrapped around him. They coiled around his arms, his chest, his throat, pulling him down to his knees. His deep voice cracked into screams as he realized the ritual had backfired. Amara gasped as she saw his empire breaking apart before her very eyes. The golden ornaments that lined the walls turned black and crumbled into dust. The carvings that once glowed with strange power melted into nothing. Even the floor beneath them began to shake, as if the mansion itself was collapsing under the weight of his lies. The smell of smoke and decay filled the air. Then came the spirits. One by one, the women who had been trapped for so long rose from the shadows. They floated around Amara, their torn wedding dresses glowing faintly, their faces no longer pale but peaceful. They circled her protectively, forming a barrier of light against Cato's darkness. Their voices rose together, chanting words opposite to his, drowning out his cries. Cato struggled, his hands clawing at the ground, his eyes wild with fear. "No!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "She was supposed to be mine. She was supposed to be the sacrifice!" But the spirits only grew stronger, their voices shaking the chamber. "Your time is over," they whispered, their voices like 1,000 echoes. Amara stood in the center, tears running down her cheeks. She did not fully understand why her choice had worked, but she felt the truth deep inside her heart. The spirits had told her the ritual demanded fear, demanded weakness, demanded submission. But she had given herself willingly, without begging or running, and that was something Cato's dark power could not feed on. Her defiance had broken the cycle. The shadows pulled tighter around him, crushing his staff into pieces. His body bent and twisted as his empire of wealth turned into ashes. The once mighty Chief Kato, feared by all of Macondo, was now just a man undone by his own greed. His screams echoed one last time before the shadows swallowed him completely, leaving nothing behind. Silence filled the chamber. The spirits turned to Amara, their faces soft, their voices gentle. "It is finished," they said. The weight lifted from the room, and Amara felt air in her lungs again. For the first time since the wedding, she felt free. The first light of dawn touched the city of Macondo, and the ground trembled as if the earth itself had seen what no human should ever see. Out of the thick smoke and ruin, Amara stepped forward. She was barefoot, her white wedding gown torn and stained, but her back was straight and her head was high. Her eyes no longer held the fear of a bride walking into the unknown. They held fire, the fire of a woman who had faced death and walked out alive. Behind her, the mansion that once stood as a symbol of power and wealth cracked and groaned like a dying beast. Its golden gates twisted, its tall walls collapsed, and its treasures turned to dust. The great palace that had towered over the city for years was now nothing more than ashes carried away by the morning wind. The drums that had shaken the night fell silent forever. The villagers gathered quickly, drawn by the smoke and noise. They came expecting to see Kato triumphant and Amara broken. Instead, they saw the impossible. She was alive, standing before them as the mansion crumbled behind her. People gasped. Some fell to their knees in shock. Those who had once mocked her for chasing wealth now bowed their heads in fear and awe. Even the elders who had warned her stared in silence, unable to believe what their eyes were seeing. Children clung to their mothers. Men stepped aside as she passed. No one dared to speak at first, but curiosity was stronger than fear. Finally, one trembling voice rose from the crowd. "What happened inside?" the villager asked. Amara stopped walking. She turned slowly, her torn veil brushing against her shoulders. Her eyes swept across the faces of the crowd, and in that moment, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. When she spoke, her voice was calm, steady, and colder than the morning air. The price was his. Her words cut deeper than a scream, heavier than a cry. The villagers shivered. The meaning was clear. Chief Kato, the man they feared and envied, had fallen. His power, his riches, his secrets, all gone. And it was not Amara who paid the price, but Kato himself. The silence that followed was so complete that even the birds seemed afraid to sing. As she walked past them, no one dared to stop her. Some reached out to touch the edge of her torn gown, as if hoping to feel a trace of her strength. Others bowed their heads lower, not in mockery, but in respect. She had gone into the lion's den and walked out while the lion perished. Amara did not look back. She left the ashes behind her, carrying nothing but the weight of the spirit's whispers and the memory of what she had survived. In that moment, she was no longer just a bride. She was a legend in the making, the woman who broke the ritual and walked away. Years passed, and Amara lived a quiet life, far from the ruins of Kato's mansion. She raised her daughter alone, never speaking of that night, never telling the child what she had seen or survived. To her daughter, she was simply a mother, strong but silent, carrying secrets she would take to her grave. But in Macondo, her name never faded. People whispered about her in the markets, in the farms, in the streets at night. They called her the bride who broke the ritual. Every December, when the winds grew heavy and the faint echo of drums carried through the air, mothers would pull their daughters close and warn them softly. Do not be blinded by wealth. Remember Amara. The story became a lesson, a warning that no gift, no palace, no promise was worth the price of a soul. Some told the tale with fear, others with pride, but no one dared to forget it. And yet, even as the years rolled on, Amara knew the danger had not vanished. Ritualists still walked among them, hidden behind wealth, charm, and power, waiting for the next young bride, desperate enough to say, "I do." Sometimes, when the night was too quiet, Amara would close her eyes and hear the voices of the lost brides, whispering in the wind. She knew her fight had ended, but the battle was not gone. She had broken Cato, but not the world that made men like him. And so, she lived each day not as a woman who escaped, but as a legend who carried a warning, hoping that someone, somewhere, would remember and choose differently.